What is up, y'all? Welcome back to the second episode of the new SEVOps. This is Aaron Bewley, and I'm here with Russ and Tyler, and we are going to run through the concept of the pillars of mission-critical infrastructure. Tell me, Russ.
Kind of like the first episode, by the way.
Yeah.
With all three of us here. Tyler, thanks for joining.
Get the whole crew back together.
That's great.
All right. Last episode was episode 0. This is episode 1.
That's right. Episode 1.
So, Russ, you read an article that was talking about what? Kind of lay it down for us here.
Well, it was an interesting article because, and not naming any names, it came from a employee of a manufacturer who makes hyperconverged products and basically stated that hyperconverged is great, but it's not ready for the prime time, meaning that it really wasn't ready for mission critical applications. And we took some notes down from this, but we thought it would be an interesting point to bring up that, really what is a mission critical application? How do we define it? And really, do we think that HCI is ready for running mission critical applications?
Yeah, fair question.
I'm going to tell you that I think the answer is probably yes.
Yeah.
So I think we got
to go with 60% of my customers agree with you by doing it too.
60% of the time, it works every time.
Every time.
That's what I was hearing. All right, so Russ, you wrote down some pillars. We're going to call it Russ's 5 pillars of mission critical, and we're going to run through those. Yeah, see if we agree.
Well, I think it'd be best to start off right. Let's see, pointing out a few different things here. Initially, and I don't know if you guys recall this. I mean, it was a while ago, right? When HCI first came out, most people really wanted to throw it at those secondary or less critical use cases. VDI, which for the record, I have customers where VDI is mission critical. Like it runs the entirety of their branch offices, which are maybe banks and POS systems. So those can very much so be mission critical. And by the way, the one I'm referring to in my head is running off of HCI. So that's number one. But then we have a couple of different things on here. VDI, email, SharePoint. Those are kind of the things that some people have listed. Those should be looking to move to HCI. But then other things like databases and, I don't know, even POS systems, et cetera. It seems like this is maybe leaning towards not running those on HCI. So it's kind of lobbying for the idea of throwing those at a SAN. And I definitely think there are areas where a SAN is a much better fit than HCI. But if we define the term mission critical, I think we have a lot of different terms for different customers as far as to what mission critical actually means for applications.
Yeah. Tyler, you got any thoughts on that?
No, I mean, that pretty nails it, right? And if you're looking at the article, it's interesting too, because one of the quotes we've gotten here is many mission critical applications such as ERP are architected to rely on the underlying hardware, the SAN, for encryption, replication, high availability. And the way that it's written kind of implies that hyperconverged infrastructure doesn't provide those data services. But I also think it highlights the convolution of terms that ends up happening is what is a mission critical application, which is exactly why Russ put together the 5 pillars. And then what are the data services that infrastructure has to provide to meet the demands of those applications. And I think breaking it down is the best way to look at it because it helps to kind of clarify what everybody's actually making an argument for, right? So
yeah,
we hit it, but that's it.
Okay. So you ready to break down the 5 pillars?
Yeah, let's break them down.
Okay.
Bring it.
Pillar number 1, properly certified. So I'm guessing what you mean by this is that the applications inside the data center that need a solution, that whatever that is qualifying itself as mission critical is certified to run that application.
Right? Yep, which is once again why this is extremely important to clarify what is mission critical, right? So what is mission critical is very much so determined by the business. And if something is homegrown, which is a lot of mission critical applications, this point or this pillar probably won't apply. So the caveat is there is for applications that require it. Epic comes up a lot as something like this, or SAP, HANA, et cetera. Those are things where certification on the platform matters. I've actually seen this in healthcare before where it seems strange to me, but the hypervisor was a requirement for an application to be supported by its vendor. So the point that I'm getting to is the infrastructure that you run it on, physical or virtual or otherwise, needs to be supported by the application vendor in order to get support for that application.
Sure.
And it's amazing the things they'll come up with. And HCI definitely is needing to go through some of those standardizations, the testing, getting validated. So if they don't meet that, then I'm not putting on HCI.
HCI seems to be flying through those vendor validations very quick.
Oh, it absolutely does.
Yeah.
100%. I think, well, it's moving through those very quickly, but that's kind of the point, right? People are seeing that this is a valuable piece of infrastructure, or at least an architecture that they can use inside of their business, but they need to get through this pillar in order to actually adopt it.
Right. Yeah.
Well, and the other thing too is that homegrown applications, certification probably isn't the right term, right? It's softer than that. It's the supportability is the key. A homegrown application still ends up being supported either by the development community that put it together or somebody that's administrating the operations side of it, right? That platform's still going to have some kind of baseline feature functionality set that's going to be critical for it. And that's what makes it mission critical. And that's what makes infrastructure decisions based on the pillars important. So supportability is sort of the key there for off-the-shelf applications, especially in mission critical workloads, where a third-party vendor has produced a software suite where potentially lives are at risk, for instance. They do have a genuinely rigorous certification process. And a lot of the times that's the kind of stuff that has slowed down HCI adoption for those off-the-shelf vendors, because it's not even so much that they don't necessarily have the pieces, the bits and pieces, the elements that are necessary for certification. It's that the certification process is an extremely long process.
Yeah.
And you may very well find something that is an outlier, but is extremely important to that third-party bundle of elements. So I think when the certification process for an off-the-shelf application is as simple as runs this test without failing and survives some kind of baseline or availability testing, it's no surprise at all that hyperconverged infrastructure is quickly getting through those wickets.
Sure.
Because fundamentally, the table stakes for infrastructure out of a hyperconverged appliance or ecosystem is absolutely there. The immaturity is gone. Now the question is, do you have the fringe elements necessary to actually push through a rigorous certification process for some of these third-party apps?
So let me ask you all a question about how you position HCI, because I get this question every now and then. People will say,
I'm so excited.
Yeah, so people will come at me and they'll be like, hey, so is it ready for such and such application, right?
Nope.
Epic or SAP HANA or whatever, right? Anything like that, anything that's typically like a fringe level application. And I'm just like, hey, hold on. Do you have anything on it yet? And they're like, no, but we were looking at it for this. I'm like, okay, what are you running your general purpose x86 vSphere workloads on? And they're like, oh, well, it's like EqualLogic or something. I'm like, okay, well, it's time to refresh EqualLogic and put that on rail, right? So I didn't mean to turn this into a commercial. I'm sorry. I'm just saying product names. I just mean we're just running it on standard external storage. Yeah, okay, move that to HCI. Like start there. I mean, do y'all suggest the same thing? Don't start with the SAP HANAs and the Epics. And am I wrong in advising that?
Well, I'll go first here. I think it's less about where they start as far as, you need to start with your traditional stack. We'll just call it generalized VMware stack. Just for the record, there's no such thing as a generalized VMware stack. It drives me crazy. But nonetheless, starting it in that area where your
general purpose
are running,
your most common applications
within VMware to know what's going to come over, but that's a different conversation.
Okay, yeah. I feel you.
But is really whether or not it's right for the purpose that the customer's trying to solve for at that moment. So if a customer comes to me and they say, I'm trying to solve for X, and maybe that is, I have this specific application subset that I need to get onto new architecture, then I will consider, okay, is HCI right for this? Mm-hmm. But if they come to me and they say, I'm trying to do, I need to get out of my compellent or name X.
3-tier storage, whatever. Yeah.
I will say, okay, have you heard of or considered HCI? And to that point, what is your depreciation schedule or maintenance schedule on right now for, say, your compute infrastructure? Because that's going to come into play there as well. And so that's kind of the positioning aspect in talking through where I go with that. If a customer comes to me and they tell me they are doing a complete refresh, and it happens from time to time, then there is a perfect opportunity to talk about HCI as possibly taking over, because in my opinion, and that's where these 5 pillars come in, it's going to be able to support probably 80% of the workloads that are out more often than not.
Well, and that's all my point is, like, don't try for like the 500-yard shot first, you know, like hit the 20-yard shot.
Right.
Well, and I think I'd add to that, right? It's a dynamic conversation. It's exactly what Russ said. But what makes it dynamic is, what does the customer need right now? Where are they in refresh cycles? What are they actually trying to get as far as a business outcome is concerned? The reasons for leaning into hyperconverged infrastructure, 90% of my conversations start with, can you do these things and make my life easier? Yes. Okay. But when we say these things, can we pick that apart a little bit? Let's make sure that things are supported on the platform. Let's make sure you don't have some uniquely homegrown application that's not going to be a good fit somehow, right? Like, let's pick it apart and make sure that we can address that, and we can kind of figure out what chunk of the, if we're talking about an entire environmental refresh, something like that, it's a completely different conversation than, I've got a new business project and I'm going to deploy a new application, but we know it's going to be hungry, and the storage that I'm running on currently is already at 50% utilization across both, of its dual controllers. I can't afford to try to spearhead the CIOs or CEOs, pet project on that stack, but I don't really want to go and interrupt my capital cycle to purchase a brand new 3-tiered architecture for this pilot, right?
Yeah.
I'm looking for an easier way to accomplish this. I don't necessarily need what I'm already doing. That's a different conversation than full data center refresh. Of course, if you're looking at this from an SDS perspective, so just a software-defined storage piece, the other piece of that too is,
do that often, Tyler?
What do you have right now?
An SDS piece.
Well, yes, I do personally. That's but it's not universal. It depends on context. So I've got a couple of customers right now that I'm working with, and what they're running up against is, I have recent investments in totally solid 3-tier storage platforms. We're happy, but more importantly, we're not deprecating them anytime soon. But it turns out I was wrong. My crystal ball was fuzzy, and I didn't get enough shelves for the new applications that were being demanded of us now. Can you help us add 5, 10, 20 terabytes of storage without having to go back and sort of rebuy on that platform? And depending on host outlay and where they are in that refresh cycle, the answer is often yes. We play nice, we can do that. It's not all or nothing. It doesn't have to be. It's not a mutually exclusive environment in a lot of HCI worlds. In others it is. So it's not universal to HCI, but that changes the conversation too.
100%. A big trigger for me is when a customer says they're looking for, or they don't use this term. To me, it says, I need more operational efficiency.
Yeah.
But really what they're telling me is they're having operational problems more so than technical ones. And that's a huge trigger for me with HCI, something that can really help them lifecycle manage and simply not really worry too much about the underlying infrastructure aspect. That's a big HCI driver.
Because it's a big outcome. And if we're talking about the feature functionality of HCI versus a SAN, most of the time we're talking about something that's table stakes. You got capacity, you got IOPS, it's highly available. It can be replicated. Like these are table stakes conversations. If we can't do that, we're dead already.
Bewley, rein us back in. This is getting out of control.
Yeah. So what you're saying is it depends. My question. You said all that just to say it depends. So that's fine. That's fair. All right. So you're saying all that stuff. Basically, you're answering my question with it depends. You're never going to basically like push somebody away from something like that because you're going to want to dig in and talk about that application. Makes sense. That's a technologist move. So I totally get it. Very cool. So pillar number 1 is properly certified. We can all agree. Rubber stamp of approval. Sounds good. Pillar number 2, resiliency and uptime. Self-healing is huge. And then to the nines. So resiliency and uptime, obviously. I don't think there's too many. I don't know if this is a conversation about HCI. I don't know if you want to gear it that way. The conversation appears to just be 5 pillars of mission critical. but kind of to what you said earlier, Tyler, I don't think that that HCI really struggles with resiliency and uptime at this point. I think if you wound the clock back maybe 18 months or so, you'd have several solutions that do. But yeah, I think availability and uptime is there.
But I also think, like Russ's comment in the 5 pillars too, self-healing is huge. Self-healing is arguably a step forward from a resiliency perspective.
Sure, yeah.
And obviously resiliency architecture is a big part of what differentiates other 3-tier architectures in general, right? You're talking about having 4 or 8 heads instead of, 2, being able to federate different units. That's in a traditional SAN environment. Those are sort of the conversation tracks to improve resiliency. In a distributed architecture where the intelligence is being handled by software, being able to self-heal just means if you've got space, it doesn't matter what components have died. We will continue to plug on as if nothing happened, and we will fill in the gaps, put you right back where you were before. That's extremely difficult to do in a 3-tier architecture.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a lot to this. This part is big for a couple different reasons, because it's fundamentally a game changer in the way the architectural design paradigms work. So self-healing is huge. I put to the nines. To the nines is a concept that we think about when we think about trying to avoid failure. It's literally what we did whenever we started designing applications for mainframes. We were designed to avoid failure. Whereas when we think of application design in today's day and age, where we have stateless this and microservice that, the idea is to expect failure and to handle it gracefully when it happens. And so I put to the nines on here because that's what we think about when we think of a 3-tier architecture. But I put self-healing on here because that's much more when we think about for HCI. Now, if you look at a singular failure to tolerate, or a RAID 5, or a replication factor of 2, or whatever you want to call these things, that is effectively 5 nines. That is a system designed for 5 nines. You can move to 6 nines once you move to 2 failures to tolerate, right? Simple math.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Does it lay out like that?
Functionally. Now, I don't know if the systems perform in that way with any given manufacturer, but that would kind of be the idea. But the reason why you're asking, is that what it is? It's because we don't ever talk about that. We designed the systems to handle failures in a different way.
Right. Yeah.
So,
than traditional external storage.
Exactly, which enables customers to look to developing those homegrown applications that are likely mission critical, to decouple highly coupled applications and loosen those dependencies, where you can start using microservices to build across a distributed platform and bring in message and queuing systems to bridge things back and forth, so that you can actually make applications more resilient, because your architecture is designed in a way to where it self-heals and allows you not to worry about those things as much. So that's what I like about it.
So do you think the capabilities of HCI makes it inherently more resilient?
I think it can, if your applications are designed in a certain manner. There's always
your infrastructure is designed in a certain manner, because you can design HCI in all kinds of different ways. You could do 2-node or
exactly. So if you have
node,
a failure to tolerate of 1 with 64 nodes, that's bad mathing.
Sure,
right there. Like you're. I mean, Tyler's sitting over there thinking like the laws of probability here are driving me insane. Like it's just not. Yeah. It's not going to function well for you, right? But that's why we have certain subsets where we might recommend you start getting past like an 8-node limit. You probably want to really start moving to a failure
smaller
of 2.
Right? So there's also a misunderstanding there in a lot of distributed systems as well. 64 nodes means the likelihood of having one of them fail, or likelihood of having 2 of them fail within that fault domain, it goes up because you're quite simply running more hours, right? If you think about just 1,000 hours of runtime equals some percent likelihood of failure. If you have 60 nodes, you have 60,000 hours of runtime in 1,000 hours. That's where it comes back to bite you. But a single failure to tolerate in a situation like that, it depends on which applications, right? It's not necessarily the entire fault domain that's going to fail catastrophically in the event that 2 nodes go down. It's an interesting conversation, but yeah, absolutely. My brain's going into the weeds immediately as I think about that. So anybody that's designing clusters that large, HCI or not, is probably not being very respectful of what they can handle from a fault domain failure anyways.
Right. Yeah.
There's all kinds of issues that have nothing to do with storage in this case.
Well, what's interesting about HCI is because of its flexibility, I would argue that you could get more resilient and less resilient. Like the window is like this, but with external storage, you're more narrowly defined because the system can do this, right?
Or it's more that you have to be predictive with 3-tier architecture. I have to know now what my needs are from an architectural perspective for not quite, but effectively the life of the frame. In an SDS environment, I'm very dynamic with how I can adjust resiliency. If you're talking strictly
sure,
right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, there's a few outliers.
I follow you, and I agree. I had to think very hardly.
Yeah.
Hardly?
There's still a couple that depends.
Very hardly? Very hard? I like hardly.
You know what I heard the other day? They're like, is that a made-up word? All words are made up.
Boom. All words are made up. Did you know what I meant? Yes, I did. Then it works.
Right. It works. All right. So at pillar number 1, properly certified. We all agree on that. Pillar number 2, resiliency and uptime is critical. I think we all agree on that. As far as the 5 pillars of mission critical. Are you going to write a blog post on this, outlining?
I probably
watch video. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Once you do that, we'll just link it in the description below on this video. Number 3, low impact maintenance operations. So non-disruptive upgrades, non-disruptive maintenance, scaling on the fly, adding capabilities, etc. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that? I agree.
I agree. The thing for this builds off of 2. So if your architecture is designed well for resiliency and uptime, it inherently means that it's going to be resilient and up through maintenance operations. They should be low maintenance, but I think we all know, we've all been through them. Heck, I've been through them with products that I praise for having high resiliency and uptime and low or no maintenance operations. There is no silver bullet, unfortunately. Yeah. But systems designed that way are extremely helpful. It's actually why with external storage, I lean into systems that are stateless in nature, because functionally not holding state or tying it to hardware will make things easier for you as you try to lifecycle software on it. Likewise, the idea of having a distributed system and being able to do rolling upgrades and intelligently move and rebalance data around either during planned or unplanned outages, the planned being the maintenance lifecycle, is very, very key. So you just want something that, one, is easy to handle because you don't want to have as many problems, but 2, you're keeping employees happy, people there. You don't have to do as many maintenance windows on the weekend. Maybe you can do them in the evening. There's a lot of reasons why this is valuable, but most importantly, just not disrupting the workflow.
So what are your thoughts on the expectation of having a maintenance window, of requiring maintenance windows? Or are we on that tipping point where we're moving into the capabilities of not needing maintenance windows?
It's hard to say. So
that's fine. You can come in.
I try not to deal in absolutes. Right?
Dave.
Yeah.
Let me take a crack at that. So
go for it.
This is my dad.
Hey, guys. Hey, Dad.
Hey, what's up?
What's up? Jump on.
Yeah.
So what's with the shades?
Give us your thoughts. It's really bright in here.
It's not bright at all, actually. It's branding.
I'm sorry. Let me go get my sunglasses, and then I'll be right back with you. So anyway, it's nice to meet you.
I'll be able to hear you better with sunglasses.
That is a Bewley if I've ever known one right there.
Yeah.
Just immediately jumping in on the camera. That's a Bewley feature. We know
it's right in.
All right. Well, I'm gonna surrender this. I did not know you were filming. Sorry, guys.
No worries. Thanks for joining us.
That's making the video, by the way.
Greg, give us your thoughts on mission critical applications.
Yes.
What were you talking about?
The fact that was 100% a Bewley move to walk in and just immediately be on
Jump
camera.
right in.
Yeah.
Give me some glasses.
That one doesn't fall far from the tree.
That's right.
Awesome.
They're talking about your willingness to just walk in and jump on the call. All right, he's deaf. He walked away.
Perfect.
He's
so
old.
What I was going to say is, so uptime, well-defined term. It means something. It applies directly to availability, which is, these are mathematical terms, right? This is when you get into statistics, you're talking about whether or not a system can maintain uptime of a certain value. That's where those nines, the seconds of downtime, it comes from an availability rating, right? That's just a different way of stating availability. if maintenance windows are required and maintenance windows mean downtime, you have, by definition, a less available system. At this point, there's no reason to find a system that requires downtime, but there's still a good argument for de-risking any operation that is reducing the resiliency of the system.
Yes.
And I think that's what Russ is getting at.
It is.
So you inherently cannot de-risk anything completely.
Yeah, I'm not saying that. Do you feel like I'm saying that?
No.
Okay.
I think we're just clarifying it, right?
Yeah.
It's the point that Russ was trying to make, but I'm just saying there's a mathematical tie back to this, right? So just because two control architectures is a perfect example. Just because you have two and they're well designed and they have a failover mechanism doesn't mean that you aren't at a higher level of risk when you drop one out to bring it back up. It's even worse when bringing it back up runs the risk of knocking out the one that hasn't been touched yet, right? And I think that's maybe where stateless architectures tend to help a little bit. But the point there is that I think getting away from maintenance windows is absolutely a thing, and it's a conversation everybody should be having. If you're not looking at architecture that can at least give you some confidence that that's possible, you're probably not looking in the right places. But it doesn't mean you don't have a maintenance window, because you're always going to have more risk when you do it.
And that's the thing, is I want architecture that doesn't require maintenance windows, and then I want my ops team to schedule a maintenance window. Like that's
there you go.
That's the idea. That's why I'm so torn in the idea.
Yeah.
There's the answer. Okay. All right. So we have properly certified resiliency and uptime, low impact maintenance operations. Pillar number 4, easy to scale and or manage. So building on the uptime concept and low impact nature, scaling the infrastructure, not moving the data. Your thoughts?
That's it. That's the big one. So, in my roles over the past several years, I've been involved in a lot of things.
Somebody's joining from the Twitters.
Whoa!
What's
Welcome.
up, Jack?
Jack, what's your last name?
You got him muted.
It's not me. He hasn't unmuted his
He is muted.
audio yet.
Yeah, maybe he's joining, or maybe he's not. I don't know.
He can hear us.
I'm super excited.
Welcome to our voices, Jack.
All right. I guess keep talking until he unmutes.
We're gonna keep going with it.
Oh, he left.
Oh, bye, Jack.
He was like, "Does this work?" It does work.
He was a
I'm out of
kid.
here.
I gotta get out. So the second part that you said there, the
He ran.
structure not moving the data, is important, because in my roles over the past few years, we've been involved in data center moves, migrations, whatever you have it, and I've even heard statistics around it. They're not my own, and I think we all know that most statistics are made up, but
No, less than half of statistics are made up.
Perfect. God, he's throwing me off here. Well, the statistic is that about 80% of issues that happen within a data center happen during a migration.
Because of a person.
And it's due to human intervention, exactly.
Right. Oh, we got another one.
We got another one. So the idea is that while data is in flight,
What's up, Peter?
trying to manage it, we run into problems with that, and that ends up that's what's causing our outages. So having a system in place that you can either non-disruptively move to the platform that you need going forward, where the data stays in place, but you swap out whatever it is you need to do from a hardware and software standpoint, and or have a system where you can effectively age off older hardware as you roll in new hardware, right? So the idea is to, move or scale the infrastructure itself, life cycle that without moving the data, because moving the data is your highest risk point inside of a data center.
I would say, though, and I think Aaron was trying to make the point too, is moving the data through manual means ends up being the real gotcha there, because I think there are a lot of storage systems well established, way older than even stuff like what I sell today, that have handled moving data underneath the covers without manual intervention very, very well, right?
Right. Sure. No, that's absolutely true.
I still think there's more risk when you move data than there is if you don't. But if people have to do something to relocate that data, the likelihood of it going sideways goes way up.
100%.
Sure. So you're just focusing on a specific piece of that question where we're talking about, I think the focus is on scaling and growing the infrastructure, not necessarily about moving the data. I guess maybe that's a smaller piece or function of it.
Right.
Before I continue with my next question, Jack, Peter, you guys want to introduce yourselves at all? Or you want to lurk? That's fine. Lurking is fine. The idea is being able to scale as a pillar of a mission critical solution.
Yes. So the scaling is important mostly because the scaling, if you cannot scale the infrastructure easily, you'll end up putting yourself into that situation where you then do have to move the data. So it's a correlation of that, right? Is the idea is that once I get onto that platform, I want to continually lifecycle manage and move on to the next version, whether it's software or hardware of that platform, without ever having to move things around or shift it. I just want to continually be on the latest and greatest thing. Honestly, this is an operational benefit that we saw in cloud computing. And that is why whenever someone comes to me and they say, I want an operational benefit, or I'm having these operational problems when it comes to my infrastructure, HCI or distributed systems, things like that, that's what comes to mind. That's why I think of, in that moment, this is a perfect use case for hyperconverged infrastructure.
Okay, so scaling up and out, both equally important?
I would say so.
What about the inverse?
I mean, with few exceptions, right?
What about scaling in and down?
You're going to need that, but yeah, up and out, you stuff grows, applications change, or dependencies change. You've absolutely got to be able to scale up and out.
100%.
Okay. All right. How important for mission critical is it to do the inverse?
I think scaling down is important. And I don't think this is as common, and I have had tons of conversations with different people over the years, is really more so when it comes to the situation of a couple things. One, it could be a situation where you are aging off old hardware. So you are evacuating them, but you want to continue using the investment, and you want to go put it in the corner somewhere else. The other idea is, and this is something specific to like your product line in VxRail, not to use products specifically, but I have had customers tell me that they are not interested. They don't care that much about the deployment mechanism of VxRail because they're going to do it once and never think about it again. But in a world where you actually do get in a situation where, oh man, we just deployed this application, we have, perhaps to Tyler's point earlier, a very large fault domain. We would really prefer to distribute this across 2 fault domains, and maybe they have 10 VxRail nodes. The ability to evacuate data, rebalance the cluster, and then take nodes out and redeploy another VxRail cluster is very, very nice to be able to do that in a very quick fashion.
Sure.
So that's something that being able to scale down or to break data apart, even if there could be a regulatory requirement that comes to you that through an acquisition you make where you have to physically segregate data. I say this not as a hypothetical. I say this as something that happened to one of my customers.
Right. Yeah.
And so that alone would be very valuable to be able to scale down and move infrastructure
Well,
out.
and do you think too, having the capability, maybe not necessarily needing to do it, even though you just outlined a perfect example of why you would, that having the capability of doing it would lend you to be classified as a more mission critical type of solution. You know what I mean?
I don't know. I would actually say I'd have to take a step back on that one. I'm not sure I agree that scaling down is something that applies to mission criticality. I think it's absolutely something that is relevant and should be had as far as conversation goes, because it's relevant to business for sure. The use case that Russ just gave is a perfect example of why you would not want to be in a situation where you could not non-disruptively scale your infrastructure back, but you could also, with a great deal of money and underutilized assets, segregate that without scaling it back. So it doesn't really it's not really affected by mission criticality in this case. I just think it's table stakes at this point.
Gotcha.
Well, I'd say it's in your PowerPoint presentation, it's a bullet.
Sure.
It's a benefit, but I again, and I'm happy to be an outlier here or a dissenting opinion.
You are an outlier.
Mission criticality
all of the time.
Bell curve, Tyler.
Yes.
Like never in the middle. Tyler.
Up and over. Mission criticality does not drive the need to scale back infrastructure, in my opinion.
Okay.
Those are not.
Listen, in the context of the topic today, Tyler's probably right. I'm not going to say he is because I'll never just say Tyler is right.
Yeah, don't ever admit that.
In the context of today, that's probably.
Yeah, and this conversation it keeps drifting towards HCI, and I don't want that to be it. Right? We're talking about the pillars of mission critical.
HCI because people said HCI.
The article was about.
Oh, the article was about that. Whoa!
Yes,
Peter, we saw you. You're a human.
You
not
are.
A bot.
You're real.
Peter from the internet. Okay, cool.
Okay, he's back to being ominous.
Okay, that's fine. Whatever. Moving on. So that was point number 4. Any other points on 4, which is easy to scale and or manage?
We didn't really touch on the management side of that, but management, absolutely. Like,
what is your name? We know what.
We know what you
What?
We know what you do.
Is that what it says? Oh, we know what you do.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, you're right. It needs to
Don't
be like
worry
we
about
know.
it.
Yeah.
don't
Okay.
worry about it.
Very good.
I wouldn't say that this is worry so much as curiosity, but all right.
What?
Tyler,
I'm
you wanted
lost
to talk
now.
about managing infrastructure.
Okay, so we've hit.
I think
You have more comments on
He's
point
not
number
done.
4?
He has comments on managing the infrastructure on the 4th.
Yeah.
Okay,
What
go
I was
ahead.
going to say was, I think that one goes back to your statistic, right? Managing infrastructure has to be easy, because the less easy it is, the more likely a human is going to screw something up. If we could set infrastructure and forget it indefinitely, we'd probably be in a better place from a risk perspective than anything else. But that's totally unrealistic. So
Right.
that's something that customers have to assess. Anyone has to assess when they're looking at providing infrastructure to a mission critical application is, am I going to be able to modify this, whether it's an upgrade or an expansion or just day-to-day operations, in a way that is non-disruptive?
Yeah.
And-
Do you care more about your guys turning knobs or servicing the application?
Right.
And even your best guy is likely to, break something eventually. We've all got horror stories.
What? Question in chat from L. Do you guys venerate the entrepreneur? Thoughts on that? So venerate, if you don't know what that means, regard with great respect, revere. Do you revere an entrepreneur? Sure.
Yeah. I mean, I know what the word meant, but I am curious as to how you came up with that definition.
Yeah,
so quickly.
where's the question? Or
Did you
what's the
just-
question in
What's the
regards?
context?
Anyway, what's the context of the question? Whatever.
Peter might have some thoughts. He
Peter,
showed
we
up
saw
on
you
camera again. Peter, we know you're real, man. You might as well just leave it on.
All right. So we've covered 4 of the 5 pillars so far. We've covered for the 5 pillars of mission critical: properly certified, resilient with uptime, low impact maintenance operations, easy to scale and or manage. I would say easy to scale and manage.
Yep.
Number 5, must be able to meet the application level performance requirements. Ooh, I guess we had another person join. What just happened? Somebody's sharing a video. Is somebody trolling us?
He is, but he didn't figure out the trick yet.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, we can't hear you.
No.
You didn't figure it out yet.
All right, take away the screen share.
Yep. Well, I can boot them in a minute, but
it's cool.
let's move on.
I thought it was strong.
It was a strong move. You missed the share the sound part.
Yeah,
Okay.
trust me, we had
So
the same issue earlier.
bullet point number 5, must be able to meet the application level performance requirements. So table stakes.
Yeah,
Um,
that's it. Table stakes.
Exactly.
This is incredibly obvious, but here's the thing. A lot of people do not believe HCI can do it.
Right.
Wrong.
Yeah.
It's so wrong.
Right. I
This
said
is
right.
one that
I mean
is
wrong.
never the problem. This is never the issue in my
Right.
experience. And I would just say test it.
Yeah.
Well, and
Well, and to that point too, or go ahead.
if you're that much of a non-believer, but you got to look at this in context as well. There are tens of thousands of people who are using HCI for mission critical applications at this point. That's kind of the point of we're trying to run home. But from a performance perspective, pretty much every application you can imagine is also being run on it. And across vendors, this is not just one product set. I mean,
Right.
it is there on a performance from a performance perspective.
Yeah, HCI in general. So to that end, though, every time I sit there and I see an HCI solution just banging the gong nonstop about performance, I'm like, yeah, okay, we get it. Like everybody is there. That's table stakes.
Table stakes.
And that's all that they will talk about, some particular solutions, right?
I'll take this into another extension.
If you back up, it goes to what we were talking about earlier about data services, right? Not just speed.
About data services.
We talked about data services around like resiliency and uptime.
Oh, right.
Right?
Yes.
I mean, that's
no, I
the-
agree. That's the thing. I don't think this is. When was the last time you actually talked about performance as the driver for what? I mean,
Never. I mean, the only
It's been
conversations
so
I'll
long.
have is like 6 months ago, I was presenting to like the global leader in oil services or whatever. and they were saying, oh, well, we're never going to look at an HCI solution because we understand it'll never hit sub-millisecond latency. I'm like, okay, well, let's just check that box real quick.
Not with that attitude.
That's right. Those are the only times I ever hear about it, is some sort of misperception around it.
Yeah.
It's never,
But
hey,
what is,
you need to prove to me that you can do a million
driving factor
IOPS. Sorry, go ahead.
I wonder what the driving factor is of that. I want to see someone throw their application onto a well-architected HCI solution and see if it doesn't meet those performance requirements. Now, granted, there are workloads that exist for sure. They can't hit certain.
Yeah.
I have a customer right now, or that I've had for many years, that their primary money-making application in their business, NVMe as it stands, is the only media or I guess protocol technically that has been able to drive latency down to the point to where they might maybe someday be able to virtualize that application.
Wow.
So there are segments, but like I said, the largest majority, the 80%, tile, I would say it's probably higher than that, being conservative, are going to be able to hit these performance requirements that we need. And plus, I'm pretty sure we'll get there with NVMe, RDMA over, the networks, et cetera, that's going to drive crazy latency performance.
Well, and I think that kind of answers your question, right? It's like, why do people focus on it? I think it's twofold. One, it's something really easy to measure. I can throw benchmarks at it. I can throw my application at it.
Right.
And I can say,
But it's weak.
You need more transactions? Don't know.
It's weak. It's a weak.
It absolutely is.
Hold on. This is Chad would say this. It's the wrong bar fight.
Yes.
It is.
Yes.
It's absolutely the wrong bar fight.
But it's the easy one to have.
Yeah.
It is.
So it's easy to measure. So it's easy to see. It's super just tangible as a result. And the other one is, usually when customers are looking at HCI, really any storage platform, any infrastructure platform at all, they're investing current dollars and they want the best they can get for those dollars, right? Like now, they want the best they can get their hands on now, because they're probably not going to get the opportunity to refresh this stuff in 3 to 5 years, longer in some cases. So they're thinking, this stuff is going to be slow when I refresh it, just like the stuff that I'm refreshing is slow today. I want it to be the least slow I can get it, given a reasonable cost, right? So I think that's the other piece of it, is they just want the most bang for their buck. Not knowing what they need 3 years from now drives them to sort of over-invest in performance and therefore put too much emphasis on it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So great job running through that. Let's wrap it up. So Russ's 5 pillars of mission critical. He's going to write a blog post on it. Number 1, properly certified. Number 2, resilient and with uptime. Number 3, low impact maintenance operations. Number 4, easy to scale and manage. Number 5, must be able to meet the application level performance requirements. So awesome. Thank you all for your time.
Well, let's wrap it up, fellas. I think that does it for this episode of SevOps 01.
Sweet.
DevOps Zoom session.
Good to have you. Let us know. Give us feedback, folks, if you like the new format. It certainly makes it easier for us to get together. So we hope to be able to produce more content, get more stuff out, have stupid conversations. Sometimes we'll probably even yell about it.
And sometimes we'll meet Tim.
And don't talk about Tim.
And do not mention Tim.
Hit us up with topics, and if y'all want to join us and chat about it, share your thoughts. All right. See y'all. I'm going to end the meeting.
Later.
Hey, everybody.